Alderman Ryan. Alderman Oldenburg, I'm sorry.
Here, and just FYI, Shane's microphone is not on, I don't believe.
Mine?
Oh, I can hear you now.
Okay.
Alderman Oldenburg.
Present.
Alderman Ryan.
Here.
Alderwoman Schweitzer.
Present.
Alderwoman Cox Antwi. Chair Cone.
Present.
Five votes. We have a quorum.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. The next item on our agenda is the approval of the meeting minutes. We have those before us from Tuesday, December 16th. I'll entertain a motion on meeting minutes.
I move we approve the meeting minutes from the date you referenced.
Can't hear you, Mr. Oldenburg. I don't think your mic is.
I move we approve the minutes from the last meeting.
It's been moved by the Alderman from the second by the Alderwoman from the 8th, that we approve our meeting minutes from Tuesday, December 16th, 2025. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderman Oldenburg.
Aye.
Alderman Ryan.
Aye.
Alderwoman Schweitzer.
Aye.
Alderwoman Cox Antwi. Chair Cone.
Aye.
5 aye votes.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Next item on the agenda, the only thing on our agenda for today, is Board Bill 25, which previously passed out of committee unanimously. I threw it on the informal calendar last year, took it off earlier this month or last month to refer back to committee. There is a committee substitute that was sent out last week for the committee to review. There have been many conversations and a couple meetings regarding this particular committee substitute. For those of you tuning in, this is related to peer-to-peer ground transportation operators at Lambert International Airport. The initial bill, as it was originally introduced last year, was amending Title 18. As some of you on the committee may recall, there was 2 committee meetings that we had related to this that were very robust conversations. We heard from various ground transportation operators. We heard from the airport. The airport folks had several concerns, predominantly related to, at the time, amending Title 18. Once it passed out of committee, the staff at the airport provided a floor substitute that was never introduced. This committee substitute is largely based off of the floor substitute that was provided by the airport staff at that time. There were also considerations made for the existing contract with Two-Row, which was the ground transportation operator that was operating illegally at the airport for 6 years. That contract was approved by the Airport Commission on August 7th of last year, was executed by the airport director on September 1st, and started collecting revenue on October 1st related to that particular peer-to-peer ground transportation operator. I am bringing this forward because we do need to update the ground transportation ordinance and to take this into consideration, particularly since it's been acknowledged by the airport authority and airport staff that there is an industry existing at the airport that they execute the contract in relation to. I have a couple amendments that I'll discuss later in the meeting that address some of the concerns, I believe, of the airport staff that were discussed in a meeting yesterday that included the mayor's office, the president's office, myself, and other folks. But I think that that's a general overview and summary of where things are today with Board Bill 25. Are there any questions from committee members at this time? I know we have a couple of folks signed up to testify. Okay, I don't know what's going on with the mic. Okay. I can hear my voice in the room, so I know the mic seems to be working. I'm sorry. Alderwoman Schweitzer, Alderman Narayan, are you able to hear me or not?
Yes, Chairman Cohen, I can hear you. I wanted to make a motion to adopt the committee substitute.
Oh, thank you.
Second?
It's been moved by the Alderman from the first, seconded by the Alderman from the second, that we adopt the committee substitute for Board Bill 25. Madam Clerk is walking back to her seat. I'll let her get settled before calling the roll.
Previous roll.
If there's been a request for previous roll, is there any objection to previous roll? Hearing and seeing none, we have put the committee substitute for Board Bill 25 before us. Thank you. Any questions from the committee at this time before we get into testimony? Oldenburg.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to make a statement that really that commends you, Mr. Chairman, for having the patience over the last few months to work with the airport manager. And quite frankly, bending over backwards in painstaking efforts to consume all of the edits that they had and concerns that they had into, this board bill and the draft. And furthermore, right, I think, it's important we take a step forward that evens the playing for all vendors at the airport, particularly when the one in question, we're making an amendment here, not for a single vendor, but we're making an amendment for, or changes rather, to what lies ahead and ensuring that there's consistency and fairness of all vendors for any city operation, I think is really important, particularly when some have been operating outside of local ordinance and city code as well. So I just want to thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I appreciate you keeping the committee in the loop every step of the way with your conversations around this particular issue and with those at the airport. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments before we get into public testimony? All right, Madam Clerk. This is all, I'll turn this one off. So this was, this is all stated in her letter, so I'll just go ahead and forward this to the clerk so it can be read into the record. That should be on its way to your inbox, Madam Clerk. It is 5 pages, but it's double spaced, so it should go fairly quick, I would imagine.
I have it.
Okay, will you please read the letter into the record, Madam Clerk?
St. Louis Lambert International Airport, Ms. Rhonda Ham Newbrook, Director, February 10th, 26. Dear Transportation and Commerce Committee members, I am sorry that I am unable to join you for this hearing to offer my comments in person. Due to the late notice of this hearing, my staff and I are unable to make ourselves available to attend this hearing. All executive members of airport staff and I had a prior commitment and are attending a critical negotiation meeting with our signatory airlines this morning. However, I submit this letter as testimony to ensure you know that the airport is opposed to the committee substitute for Board Bill 25 for several reasons. First and foremost, the airport is at a critical juncture in the negotiation of a new business deal for the city with its signatory airlines. If the city has the support of the signatory airlines, the proposed business deal will fundamentally alter the way that the airport operates and authorize the construction of the long-awaited consolidated terminal program. This will in turn also alter how permittees, concessionaires, and all other partners conduct business at the airport, both in the short and long term. These negotiations are at a critical stage, and a vital part of the negotiation is maintaining trust and consistency. While this bill does not directly impact these airlines, it will certainly be perceived as a fundamental transformation of the board's oversight of the airport. This sort of interference in airport business affairs tends to make the signatory airlines nervous, as our airline partners have experienced other city legislators setting business terms of these leases by ordinance. The airport and the airlines feel very strongly that airport business should be the discretion of the airport director and the executive staff, subject, of course, to the typical oversight and approval by the Airport Commission, the Board of Estimate and Apportionment, and the Board of Aldermen. However, this bill directly dictates the business terms of a revenue agreement. The airlines are looking for transparent partnerships to ensure the long-term success of the airport and their desire to operate at airports and realize the value of same. Furthermore, I believe this legislation is premature. The legislation proposed would lock the airport into a regulatory scheme for peer-to-peer car rentals after only 5 months of the current 12-month pilot for the peer-to-peer car rental permit program. That pilot permit held by Turo commenced on September 1st and will terminate on August 31st. The airport has not yet had an opportunity to discuss internally what changes we would like to see to permit based on our experience of enforcing it, and likely will not for several months. Even so, the current process required by Title 18 provides additional opportunities for stakeholder input, including that of Alderman Cone and Board President Green, because any new or additional permit or permits must be presented to the Airport Commission for approval prior to execution. This long-standing process ensures additional opportunities for their input prior to the continuation of the pilot or the formalization of the regulatory scheme surrounding peer-to-peer operators. However, passing Board Bill 25 at this point severely restricts the airport and its commission's opportunity to adjust based on experience and stakeholder input. Committee Substitute Board Bill 25 was based in part on an early draft of the current permit. If this bill is passed, it will lock the airport into regulatory scheme of the pilot program before the airport can fairly evaluate that pilot program. I am also concerned about contradictions between this bill and the existing ordinance 69382 and fear that passage of this bill will result in unequal treatment of ground transportation operators. This bill was drafted as a floor substitute intended to act as an emergency stopgap measure so that if the Board of Aldermen chose to act, their actions could be enforced by the airport and would not violate any federal or contractual obligations. However, after Board Bill 25 was placed on the informal calendar in July without using the floor substitute, the airport reached the compromise requested by this committee's chair and renegotiated the proposed permit to address the concerns of the board. This bill remained on the informal calendar for 7 months with no further communication or questions from the board on this matter. We anticipated this would alleviate the need for this bill. This past Wednesday, the airport was informed that this bill would be revived and discussed again by this committee. After a brief review, the airport believes that this bill needs additional fine-tuning. For instance, all ground transportation operators work or stage in areas designated by rule. The airport sets the designated areas for each class of ground transportation operator in our rules and regulations, not in the ordinances. This bill would define and restrict the designated area for one class of operator by ordinance with no allowance for alteration by rule. This is inconsistent with the standard approach under the ground transportation policy Ordinance 69382 as amended by 71242, which allows designated areas for every other ground transportation operator to be established and modified by rule. Additionally, there are some discrepancies between the hyper-Pacific definitions contained in Board Bill 25 and the more generally defined terms in Ordinance 69382. Finally, as the airport seeks to modernize its facilities, it is also engaged in the effort to modernize its permitting progress and has several items actively under consideration for updating. As part of this effort, the airport expects to present amendments to the ground transportation ordinance. The airport requests the board permit it time to present a consolidated update rather than implementing the piecemeal permitting in reform represented by Board Bill 25. A consolidated approach is a better use of the airport's compliance and oversight resources and avoids repeatedly diverting airport professionals from oversight of airport contractors and permittees in order to evaluate the impact of various legislative proposals. Additionally, the airport industry and the industries associated with the operation of an airport, ground transportation concessions, equipment providers, handlers, etc., are undergoing rapid transformation. The airport is trying to remain as close to the cutting edge of these changes as we can so that we can ensure that airport customers have access to the services they expect and that the revenue from those services to the airport is maximized. This transformation in the industry is likely to require additional changes to this ordinance and potentially the other ordinance governing the airport. I believe that taking a holistic rather than piecemeal approach to reform is more likely to meet with success for both the airport and its stakeholders. I appreciate the committee's time, and I am grateful for the opportunity to correspond with you on this issue, which I believe is very important. I am opposed to this bill for the reasons laid out in this letter and request that this committee not recommend the passage of Board Bill 25 in any form at this time. I remain committed to ensuring that all firms doing business at the airport are treated fairly and that similar services are treated similarly. If you have questions or concerns regarding airport operations, please do not hesitate to contact me. Respectfully yours, Rhonda Ham Niebrook, Airport Director, City of St. Louis.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. I appreciate that. I appreciate everyone's time as that was read into the record. Before we get into public testimony, as I mentioned earlier, I do have 3 amendments that I emailed out to the committee earlier this morning that will update the committee substitute and the whereas clauses to attempt to address some of the airport director's remarks that were just read. But I think it's important to also reiterate some of the sequence of events that led us to where we are today. There was a ground transportation peer-to-peer operator that had been operating at Lambert for many years with no contract, with no revenue coming to the airport, that was in direct competition with other ground transportation providers that had agreements with the airport. The last time that we had amended the ground transportation ordinances was back in 2020. And substantively, had amended some of these ordinances back in, let me pull up my record here. I believe it was 2006, 2003, 1998. There had been several amendments to this ordinance previously that were reviewed by the airport and others. In terms of the ground transportation operations at the airport, my amendments will address this, but yes, it is traditionally something that is promulgated by the airport, but specifically in the existing ordinance that the airport director was referencing. We do have in that ordinance language that says that designated areas are determined or could be determined by St. Louis County ordinance. St. Louis County ordinance can designate a designated area at the airport. The Taxi Cab Commission, it's a much broader term that they use in the ordinance itself, but essentially the Taxi Cab Commission by the city or by airport authority, which is the airport commission or the airport director. So this is a process or a rule that is granted authority already to those entities to be able to promulgate these rules around designated areas. And the conversation that we had yesterday, and I think it's important for some historical context, last year when we were discussing this in committee, there was a huge concern around revenue in particular, both from the perspective that we weren't collecting it from this particular ground transportation peer-to-peer operation, but also the potential impact that any changes to the time to Title 18 or at the time to Title 18, we're not changing Title 18 now with this committee substitute, but the concern was that any changes made by the Board of Alderpersons could have a chain effect that the airport airlines, which we are a residual airport, meaning that the airlines do pay a significant, portion of operations at the airport. And so, and certainly with the terminal consolidation project, are very much engaged and very much supporting, sponsoring, paying for a good portion of that consolidation project. That the airlines would have a particular issue with the Board of Aldermen taking action on this, as it's traditionally done through recommendations of the airport staff. During conversations yesterday, the kind of goalpost moved, if you will. The language, comments, feedback, had kind of largely circulated around whether or not this committee has the ability to designate areas, which I think I just, in my comments mentioned, underneath the existing ordinance, we do. And then also the, potential concerns of a chain effect that the airlines have. And one of the, newer pieces of information that came out of that conversation was that we do update the ground transportation agreement ordinance, somewhat regularly, periodically, The last update to that was back in 2000, so 6 years ago. And there was no definitive time frame that was provided in terms of when that will come before us, but I committed to the airport director that I am, more than willing to work with her on any holistic changes to that ordinance as well. As some of you may be familiar, this is an ever-evolving industry right now. Actually, Rob Salerano, who was on the call yesterday, also mentioned that ground transportation for a very long time was considered a quote-unquote sleepy industry, that there weren't a lot of changes within the industry, but certainly within the last 6 years, there have been regular changes in the industry, whether that was ride sharing, now peer-to-peer rentals, and then more recently Waymo has come on the scene. So there's a lot of different technology and other changes that are impacting the industry. And so there is going to be an updated holistic ordinance. But in the meanwhile, since the airport authority and the airport director and staff have already acknowledged that this is an existing industry at the airport and there's no ordinance pertaining to it, I think it's prudent that we move forward and put some regulations in place via ordinance. So I'll get more into that a little bit as we talk about the various amendments. But at this time, I'll entertain any testimony that is before us today. Madam Clerk, is there anyone online that wants to testify?
We have a Mr. Don Leffy. I'm not sure if that's how to pronounce the last name.
Lefebvre, yes, ma'am.
Lefebvre.
Chairman Cohen, President Green, members of the board, my name is
Mr.
Don
Lefebvre.
Lefebvre.
Hello?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can, but I need to make sure that you're sworn in for your testimony. Would you mind raising your right hand if you're able to do so? Thank you. Do you promise to tell the truth and nothing but the truth before the committee today?
I do.
Thank you. You may proceed.
Thank you. Chairman Cohen, President Green, members of the board. My name is Don Lefebvre. I serve as the president of the American Car Rental Association. On behalf of our members who operate at St. Louis Lambert International Airport, I want to thank you for the opportunity to testify in strong support of Board Bill 25. At its heart, Board Bill 25 is about basic fairness. Peer-to-peer platforms like Turo provide a similar service and utilize the same taxpayer-funded infrastructure. Therefore, they should operate under the same set of rules. We believe that the same service equals the same rules. If a vehicle is being rented at the airport, the same safety, insurance, and fee structures should apply, regardless of the platform used to book it. Same access to customers. One company or segment of the industry should not have preferred walkable access to customers, particularly if that opportunity was not extended to other operators. And protecting city revenue. Ensuring peer-to-peer platforms pay their fair share of concession fees protects the airport's revenue stream and ensures that one segment of the industry isn't unfairly subsidizing the other. So why is this legislation needed now? While the airport did issue a permit to Turo this past September with the terms identical to what the car rental operators pay at the airport and no special preferred access to the terminal garages, it's important to note the timing. That action on the terms occurred only after the committee signaled its intent to lead on this issue through Board Bill 25. While the current permit is a step in the right direction, permits are administrative and can be changed or rescinded at any time. Board Bill 25 provides the necessary legislative floor. It enshrines these standards into law, ensuring that fairness is not subject to administrative whim. All current and future market entrants know exactly what the rules of the road are, and St. Louis remains a competitive, transparent market for transportation services. In closing, we aren't asking for special treatment. We're simply asking to maintain and enshrine a level playing field into law where competition can thrive. I urge the committee to give Board Bill 25 a due pass recommendation. Thank you for your time and leadership on this issue.
Does anyone have any questions of Mr. Lefebvre? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony this morning. Madam Clerk, is there anyone else online that has signed up to testify? Madam Clerk, is there anyone else online that signed up to testify? Okay.
No one else.
We'll go ahead and take testimony from those in the hearing room. Madam Clerk, do you have the names of the folks that have signed up to testify?
No, we just had one that possibly wanted to speak. He'll let me know in the moment he said.
I thought I saw someone sign in earlier.
That was him.
Okay. Okay. All right. So no further testimony on this board bill at this time. I will go ahead and start a discussion on the amendments to Board Bill 25. Well, I guess we should actually, no, we'll go ahead. We've already adopted Board Bill 25, the committee substitute. So we'll go ahead and discuss the amendments that were emailed out earlier today. There, Darius, were you able to email the amendment out? Okay. So the amendment or amendments that I'd like to make for the board bill or the committee substitute this morning, as I emailed out to the committee members as well. The first amendment or first part of the amendment is, and all three of these are just inserting language into the whereas clauses. It's not substantively changing the context or text of the bill itself, or the existing ordinance. It's just updating all three of these are just whereas clauses to provide some contextual flavor, if you will, in an attempt to address some of the concerns that were outlined in the airport director's letter to this committee. The first is whereas Ordinance 69382, as amended by Ordinance 7122, expressly states that designated areas are defined as as areas of airport roadways and parking areas designated by St. Louis County Ordinance by the governmental agency authorized to issue taxicab licenses for the jurisdiction where the airport is located by the city, which would be this Board of Aldermen, or by the airport authority or by the airport director for specified uses by specified ground transportation operators or classes of ground transportation operators. So, with this language, adding it into the whereas clauses, is an attempt to, establish that this body does have the authority underneath the existing ordinance to have this discussion and to promulgate this particular rule as, specified as the designated areas, which the airport director in her letter said that we do not have that authority. I think that this directly, addresses that, establishes that it is clear in the existing ordinance that we do have that authority. St. Louis County even has that authority that can establish a designated area at the airport. And so the second, moving on, well, are there any questions on that first part of the amendment or any comments? Alderwoman Schweitzer.
Thank you, Chairman Cohn, for that. One of the issues with some of these peer-to-peer rental sharing companies is the designated areas aren't the same as the other rental car areas. This is just whereas clause specifies that the city can designate an area, but it doesn't talk about where that area is. Is that somewhere else in the bill, or is that just part of the permit?
No, that's already addressed in the committee substitute, Alderwoman. Okay. But this whereas clause is trying to address the airport director's concern.
Just the right.
Right, yeah, but the designated areas are defined in the committee substitute itself for the peer-to-peer ground transportation operators.
Okay.
Thank you for the question of clarification. Do you have any other comments or questions?
No, thank you. I do appreciate the, I see the definition talking about what lots are available. as well. I know that was something that we discussed at length during the previous committee meeting, so thank you.
Correct. Thank you, Alderwoman. Alderwoman Cox-Antwi.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to make a comment and state I find this to be very helpful clarification in terms of the authority. I know that was something that the airport director expressly questioned in her letter, and I think this context is maybe helpful for members of the public and those that may be watching and following this legislation to understand that we are not creating or trying to assert any new authority. This is already pre-existing authority that the city has, and I also think this maybe should address some of the expressed concern about the airline operators having concern with this action taking place at this time. Again, we're not exerting any new authority of the right of the city to designate these areas, as they are not affecting inside airport operations but outside ground operations. So I find the amendment very helpful.
Thank you, Alderwoman. Any further questions or comments on this particular part of the amendment? I'll move on to the second part. So the second whereas clause that I'd like to add, again, just for additional context and an attempt to address some of the concerns that have been brought forward, and it reads, whereas the airport director and airport authority periodically review ground transportation industry surveys and recommend updates to the ordinance or ordinances about ground transportation operators. This last occurred in 2020. It is recognized by this committee, I'm inserting some language there, but recognized that a holistic ground transportation ordinance is needed, but it hasn't been drafted to acknowledge and incorporate updates within the industry and is expected to be produced within the next 2 years. This, particular part of the amendment is one, again, trying to assuage any concerns, on the part of, both the airport director and potentially the airlines, that we are, we're not trying to create a chain effect here. We are, aware that there is a need for a holistic ground transportation ordinance or an update to the ordinance. But in the conversation, as I mentioned earlier, that we had yesterday, there's no definitive timeline on that yet. And when I asked the question, they provided a response that was essentially, we don't have the ground transportation survey completed yet. They won't be able to start working on drafting a ordinance that updates the kind of comprehensive or holistic ground transportation ordinance until that happens. They can start to work on some of the operational side of things based off of feedback and various things that they're already aware of. But it likely will not happen. Well, it definitely won't happen this session. And their target is to try and get it done sometime next session, whether that's later this year or next year. But there was no absolute or definitive time frame that was provided. That's kind of a goal of theirs. But I wanted to make sure that pertaining to this particular part of the amendment, that we're acknowledging that we do support a holistic ground transportation ordinance, and want to acknowledge that this is a kind of one-off situation due to the existing industry trends and challenges that we've already heard about exhaustively at this point. Any questions about this particular amendment or comments, or this part of the amendment? And then the last, whereas clause that I would like to have inserted reads, whereas by most recently entering into a no-bid contract approved by the Airport Authority on August 7th and executed by the Airport Director on September 1st, 2025, they recently recognized the need for regulations and restrictions about peer-to-peer operators at and around the airport. And that's just simply another acknowledgement that this is something that the airport and Airport Authority have already promulgated rules and restrictions around that. And so this board is simply further acting upon what has already been undertaken by the airport authority and airport staff. So, the airport director in her letter, said that, this is not standardized process. She is correct. However, this is already acknowledged by the airport authority and airport staff, and we're simply taking the steps to codify what has already been approved by the airport authority and the airport staff. So it is not, completely out of bounds or out of line, with the existing process. And any questions, comments, concerns about that particular clause? Oh, Alderwoman Cox-Antwi.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Not on amendment, but I did just want to ask one quick question going back to Amendment 2. I know it's unfortunate that we don't have a representative from the airport here today to answer questions, but you may know their intention with potentially the upcoming ground transportation survey and the ground transportation ordinance that is needed. In the current committee substitute that we have, I know there was a previous ground transportation ordinance reference that doesn't include peer-to-peer operators. Would this future ground transportation ordinance that they're seeking seek to incorporate those?
Just based off of the conversation that I had yesterday, yes, that is their goal, to include, which in the event that, or when, I should say, that is adopted, that could potentially all end this particular ordinance, if passed by this committee and this board and signed into law by the mayor. So any future ordinance has the potential to update any, potential, legislation that we pass here as well. But, to answer your question directly, yes, that is my understanding. And they're, also, hoping to address some of the newer industries that have popped up just within the past year. As I mentioned earlier, as an example, Waymo is another one that they would, like to try and incorporate into an updated ground transportation ordinance.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. I think it's helpful to know that this this current bill, if we pass it out of committee today, is potentially able to address some of the ongoing concerns, but there will be future opportunities to have this discussion and address any issues going forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion on, I'm just going to adopt this as one amendment with all three whereas clauses because they're being inserted into the same place. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I would like to move that we adopt Amendment 1 with all three whereas clauses to Board Bill 25 Committee Substitute. It's been moved by the chair, seconded by Alderman from the second, that we adopt the amendments to Board Bill 25 Committee Substitute. Madam
Previous
Clerk,
roll.
there has been a request for previous roll. Is there any objection to previous roll? Hearing and seeing none, Board Bill Committee Substitute as amended is now before us. Any discussion on the board bill in its entirety at this point? Seeing none, I'll...
Hi, Mr. Chair, sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't see your hand, Alderwoman. Please
That's
proceed.
okay. Thank you so much. My question is specifically around Section 5, which is to do with the fees and charges piece. I am making sure that that is what is in the current permit for any peer-to-peer operators at the airport now, and this isn't changing anything that's been said or as part of what is happening in operations.
No, Alderwoman, that is based off of the existing contract with the organization that's doing ground-to-ground transportation operations. So that is in line with what is already being paid. So it doesn't change anything from that perspective.
Thank you. And do you imagine that if the new ground transportation policy goes into place and is like it's, as you said, it hasn't been changed. And no, this one mentions 2013, but I think you said 2020. I guess I would not want to have something in law that dictates a cost that is something, that limits us in the future from, dealing with inflation or just changes to the industry in terms of how much makes sense to charge. Is it your understanding that this will be a piece that is just generally addressed by a new ground transportation agreement, or is in something that eventually will, change with the times, or how do you anticipate that going forward?
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, Alderwoman, I very much support a holistic update to our ground transportation ordinance. So at that point in time, any concerns or changes that would need to be addressed, including if there are any concerns or issues related to that particular section of the board bill, I would be happy to support that at that time as well.
Because I don't, and this is just I'm not sure that it's written out in other parts, the exact percentage paid, or is it for other car rental platforms?
So I believe when I sent out the amendment or the original committee substitute last week, I also included the existing language in the ordinances. It's not redlined, it's blue lined, where this changes the existing ground transportation ordinance. So to my knowledge, I don't believe that there is a specified percentage, but there is definitions around gross receipts and how various contracts can be administered in terms of percentages, MAGs, minimum annual guarantees. The existing contract with this particular ground-to-ground transportation operator does not have a MAG involved in it. So this is largely just mirroring what has already, and again, trying to address some of the concerns. We're just mirroring what's already been authorized by the Airport Commission, so that we're trying to address some of those concerns related to this body's authority and any concerns that the airlines might have with us being viewed as potentially stepping out of our bounds.
Okay, I do wish that someone from the airport were here to answer questions today. It's an important topic and something that I know we all want to get right, and it's hard to have a letter that we can't address. So I will be giving Director Hamnebergy a call later to understand a little bit more, because it seems like this section in particular is what is much more specific than so many other things that we're looking at from a general view at the airport, unless we're talking about specific contracts that we are only really involved in if it's a certain length of time. So
Alderwoman, there are specific dollar amounts that are specified in the ordinance already, the existing ordinance. So, the fees and charge, as an example, section 6 addresses fees and charges in the existing ordinance. And in the existing ordinance, there's a fee schedule for various ground transportation operators, for charter bus operators, for off airport parking operators. So there are fee schedules that are already enumerated in the ordinance, and they have specific dollar amounts.
Okay, thank you. That's incredibly helpful and answers my concerns. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, I just had to pull that up to be able to view that real quick. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion on Board Bill 25 Committee Substitute as amended. That's not a motion.
I move we adopt Board Bill 25.
Pass, do pass. With the do pass recommendation. Yeah. Okay, it's been moved by the Alderman from the second that we pass Board Bill 25 Committee Substitute as amended with a due pass recommendation. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been seconded by the Alderman from the 8th. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderman Oldenburg. Aye. Alderman Ryan.
Aye.
Alderwoman Schweitzer.
Aye.
Alderwoman Cox Antwi.
Aye.
Chair Cohn.
Aye.
5 aye votes.
With that motion, pass Board Bill 25 committee substitute as amended out of committee with the do pass recommendation. That is the last of the business before us during today's committee hearing. I appreciate everyone's time. I am sure we will continue to have conversations around this well into the future. I look forward to those. And again, thank you for everyone's time this morning. We had all members present, Madam Clerk.
Members were present.
And with that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move that we adjourn.
Second, previous roll.
Been moved by the alderman or alderwoman from the 8th, seconded by the alderman from the 2nd. There's been a request from previous roll by the 1st. Is there any objection? Seeing none, we stand adjourned.